Have you ever thought about what it takes for a good person, someone who is kind, compassionate, and ethical, to engage in acts of cruelty or even turn into a monster? Picture someone you admire, someone you trust, gradually transforming into someone completely unrecognizable. What if I told you this isn't just a rare phenomenon, but rather a recurring pattern throughout history and human behavior? Today, we're delving into one of the most unsettling and thought-provoking questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes commit bad deeds? By the time this video ends, you'll uncover the shocking mechanisms that drive ordinary individuals into darkness. More importantly, you'll learn how to identify and resist these forces, with the final insight being the most crucial and empowering of them all. This journey will take us deep into psychological experiments, historical events, and philosophical reflections, revealing just how thin the line between good and evil truly is. But this isn't just a story about other people. It's a mirror, forcing us to look inward and ask, what would I do in their position? Could I too be influenced by these forces? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might forever change the way you see the world and yourself. The Lucifer effect is a concept made famous by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who led the infamous Stanford prison experiment. His findings were profoundly disturbing. The environment we are placed in, the roles we take on, and the authority we obey can alter even the most virtuous individuals, turning them into perpetrators of harm. Think about it. History is filled with cases of ordinary people committing extraordinary atrocities. The guards in Nazi concentration camps, soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, and bystanders who remained silent as horrors unfolded. These individuals were not born evil. In many cases, they were just regular people caught in circumstances that awakened the darkest sides of human nature. But why does this happen? The answer lies in a combination of psychological and social forces that shape human behavior. The power of authority. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s revealed a chilling reality. People are willing to go to extreme lengths, even inflicting pain on others, when instructed by an authority figure. In his study, participants were asked to administer electric shocks to another person, who was actually an actor pretending to feel pain. Disturbingly, most participants continued to deliver shocks, even when they believed they were causing serious harm, simply because they were told to do so. Now, think about your own life. How often do we follow instructions without questioning them? Whether from a boss, a leader, or even societal norms, we often comply without resistance. But what would you do if someone in power asked you to compromise your morals for what they claimed was the greater good? The power of dehumanization. Another critical factor is dehumanization. When we strip others of their humanity, labeling them as enemies, subhuman, or inferior, it becomes far easier to justify acts of cruelty. This tactic has been used repeatedly in propaganda, war, and even in everyday conflicts. It's much easier to harm someone when you no longer see them as a person. Now, consider the language used today in social and political discourse. How often do we see entire groups of people reduced to labels or stereotypes? How does this diminish our empathy and fuel an us versus them mentality? The power of social roles and group dynamics. But dehumanization is only part of the equation. Social roles and group dynamics play a significant role as well. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment provided a vivid demonstration of this. College students were randomly assigned the roles of either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Within days, the guards began displaying abusive behavior, while the prisoners exhibited extreme stress and submission. What was most shocking? How quickly the participants lost their sense of individuality and conformed to the roles they were assigned. This raises a crucial question. How much of our identity is truly our own? And how much is shaped by the roles society imposes on us? Are we truly independent, or are we unconsciously playing roles dictated by the systems around us? Recognizing the forces at play. These forces, authority, dehumanization, and group dynamics, are not just abstract concepts. They operate in our daily lives, influencing how we think, behave, and perceive others. We see them in workplaces, in schools, on social media, and even within our own families. The first step in resisting them is recognizing their presence, the tipping point. But what about the precise moment when a good person crosses the line? That moment is often subtle. It starts with small compromises, a decision to stay silent in the face of injustice, a choice to go along with something just this once. Over time, these seemingly minor choices add up, creating a slippery slope that can lead to significant moral failure. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever made a decision that went against your values simply because it felt easier or safer? What were the consequences? As we continue, we'll explore how to recognize these moments before they spiral out of control. More importantly, we'll uncover how to build resilience against these psychological forces. But first, let's confront a deeper question. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect? Or is it a danger that we all face? Stay with me, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and human nature. Let's now address a question that lingers in many minds. Are some individuals truly immune to the Lucifer effect? The answer, though unsettling, is that none of us are entirely resistant. Psychologists have long debated whether personality plays a role in resisting corruption and moral collapse. While certain traits, such as strong empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage, may serve as protective factors, the truth remains that under the right, or perhaps the wrong circumstances, anyone can fall prey to these forces. Consider it this way. Within each of us lies the potential for both immense goodness and unimaginable harm. This duality is a recurring theme in literature, religion, and philosophy. The renowned Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung referred to it as the shadow, the darker, often suppressed aspects of ourselves that we hesitate to acknowledge. Jung believed that to truly understand ourselves, we must confront the shadow and integrate it into our conscious awareness. Have you ever experienced a surge of anger or envy, so intense that it startled you? Have you ever acted impulsively in the heat of the moment, only to deeply regret it later? These are glimpses of the shadow at work. If left unchecked, this shadow can grow, manifesting in ways that align with the Lucifer effect. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is our greatest defense. By understanding the psychological mechanisms that lead to moral collapse, we gain the power to resist them. The danger of moral disengagement. Now, let's delve deeper into how these forces operate in real life and, more importantly, how we can counteract them. One of the most insidious mechanisms at play is something psychologists call moral disengagement, a concept introduced by Albert Bandura. Moral disengagement explains how individuals rationalize harmful behavior to avoid feelings of guilt or remorse. For instance, someone might convince themselves, everyone else is doing it, or the ends justify the means. These rationalizations create a psychological distance between the individual and their actions, making wrongdoing easier to justify. Consider how this manifests in everyday life. A student cheats on an exam, thinking it's just a one-time thing. A manager mistreats employees, believing it's necessary to meet company goals. In these moments, moral disengagement enables individuals to act in ways that contradict their core values. The antidote: moral vigilance and empathy. The remedy for this is what some psychologists call moral vigilance, the ability to actively question our actions and their consequences, even when it's uncomfortable. Ask yourself, am I justifying something that deep down I know is wrong? Another powerful counterforce is empathy. Empathy serves as a shield against dehumanization. When we truly see others as complex, feeling individuals, people with hopes, fears, and dreams, it becomes far more difficult to harm them. This is why storytelling, art, and human connection are so essential. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the barriers that divide us. The role of leadership in society. But what about the bigger picture? How do we address the systems and structures that perpetuate harm and enable the Lucifer effect on a larger scale? This is where leadership and collective responsibility come into play. History has shown that charismatic leaders can either elevate or corrupt entire societies. Adolf Hitler manipulated fear and prejudice to justify atrocities, whereas Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire resistance against injustice and promote positive change. This leads us to a crucial question. What kind of leader do we choose to follow? And just as importantly, what kind of influence do we have on those around us? Even if we don't hold traditional positions of authority, we all have influence within our families, communities, and workplaces. The key question is, do we use that influence to promote compassion and fairness? Or do we, consciously or unconsciously, contribute to harm and division? Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Who are the people you admire? What values do they embody? And just as significantly, what kind of example are you setting for those who look up to you? The battle within, good versus evil. As we examine forces such as authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and leadership, it becomes evident that the battle between good and evil is not merely external. It is an internal struggle, one that each of us faces daily. But here's the empowering truth. Just as circumstances can lead people astray, they can also guide us toward extraordinary acts of kindness, courage, and integrity. The same mechanisms that create monsters can also create heroes. So, how do we ensure that we stay on the path of righteousness? How do we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of the Lucifer effect when it arises? The answers lie ahead. Recognizing and resisting moral failure. In the next section, we will uncover practical strategies for recognizing and resisting the psychological forces that lead to moral collapse. These strategies have been tested by psychologists, spiritual leaders, and individuals who have faced extraordinary challenges. And remember, the final insight we will explore is the most transformative of all, a realization that could change not only how you see others, but also how you see yourself. Awareness alone is not enough to resist the forces that lead us astray. First, we must understand a crucial truth. Recognizing the psychological mechanisms behind the Lucifer effect is an essential step, but awareness by itself is insufficient. We need actionable strategies to counteract their influence. Let's explore these strategies, beginning with one of the most powerful defenses against moral collapse: the power of moral courage. The power of moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to stand up for what is right, even in the face of fear, opposition, or personal loss. It compels individuals to speak out against injustice, protect the vulnerable, and admit mistakes, even when remaining silent would be the easier choice. However, moral courage is not an inborn trait. It is something we develop through deliberate practice and reflection. Consider historical figures like Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her seat on a segregated bus ignited the civil rights movement. Think about whistleblowers who expose corruption and wrongdoing, often at great personal cost. These individuals were not free from fear, but they chose to act despite it. Cultivating moral courage. So, how can we develop moral courage in our own lives? Identify your core values. What principles matter most to you? Honesty, compassion, fairness, accountability. Reflect on times when you faced a moral dilemma. Did you act in alignment with your values, or did you compromise them? Mental rehearsal. A practical exercise is to imagine yourself in challenging ethical situations. What would you do if you witnessed bullying at work? How would you respond if pressured to follow an unethical directive? By visualizing these scenarios and rehearsing your response, you strengthen your ability to act decisively when the moment arises. Build a support system. Surround yourself with people who share your values. Strong social connections provide accountability and encouragement, making it easier to resist the pressures of conformity and authority. Recognizing the influence of our environment. But what happens when we find ourselves in systems or environments designed to erode our morals? This is where situational awareness becomes critical. Situational awareness means recognizing the subtle cues and dynamics that shape behavior. For example, observe group norms. What is considered acceptable or expected in a given environment? If you notice patterns of exclusion, manipulation, or harm, ask yourself, is this truly right? Or have I simply accepted it because everyone else has? The power of small actions. Often, we feel powerless in the face of systemic issues, but even small acts of resistance can create a ripple effect. One person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others to do the same. For instance, speaking up against unethical workplace practices may seem risky, but it can encourage others to voice their concerns. Choosing kindness and understanding in everyday interactions can challenge the culture of dehumanization that often permeates society. In the end, our choices, no matter how small, shape the world around us. The question remains, will you choose to be a passive participant in moral failure or an active force for good? The importance of self-reflection. Philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Self-reflection allows us to recognize our biases, own our mistakes, and grow from them. It's not about achieving perfection, but about making progress, becoming just a little better, a little more aware each day. Make it a habit to regularly ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? Reflecting on these questions trains you to act with greater intention and integrity. Can the Lucifer effect ever be fully neutralized? While the answer may depend on individual and societal factors, the key lies in fostering what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls the heroic imagination. This mindset enables ordinary people to perform extraordinary acts in the face of moral challenges. It's the belief that heroism is not reserved for an exceptional few. It is within reach for all of us. Cultivating the heroic imagination. To develop this mindset, look for opportunities to practice small acts of heroism. This could mean standing up for someone being treated unfairly, volunteering to help those in need, or simply choosing kindness over indifference in your daily interactions. Study the lives of those who have exemplified heroism, whether historical figures or modern-day role models. Ultimately, resisting moral failure requires more than just awareness. It demands action. Will you be a bystander, or will you step forward as a force for good? Changemakers and their stories serve as a powerful reminder that courage and compassion are within reach for all of us. At this moment, you might be asking yourself, what is the most profound insight of all? What final realization has the potential to reshape how we perceive ourselves and the world? The answer lies in recognizing the deep interconnectedness of humanity. The boundary between good and evil does not separate groups or nations. Rather, it runs through the heart of every individual. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn once wrote, "The battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man." This understanding is both humbling and empowering. It reveals that every person has the capacity for both harm and healing. Yet it also grants us the power of choice. Every moment presents a fresh opportunity to act with integrity, resist the pull of darkness, and contribute to a world founded on compassion and justice. Stay with me, because in the final section, we will delve even deeper into how these principles can be applied to your life. Together, we will uncover actionable steps to not only counteract the Lucifer effect, but also become a force for good in a world that urgently needs it. Up to this point, we have examined the psychological factors that can lead good individuals toward darkness: authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and the influence of group dynamics. We have explored how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection serve as shields against these influences. Now, let's shift our focus to what you can begin doing today, not just to build resilience, but to become a beacon of light in difficult circumstances. The first step is recognizing your own influence. No matter how minor or insignificant your role may appear, you possess the power to shape the environment around you. Every interaction contributes to the norms and values that guide others. Are you fostering a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability? Or are you silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Consider the story of an individual who altered the course of history through seemingly small actions. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during World War II, was initially driven by profit. Yet, he used his resources to save the lives of over 1,000 Jewish people from the Holocaust. His story demonstrates that even in one of history's darkest periods, a single person can make an extraordinary difference. You do not need to wait for extraordinary circumstances to follow this example. You can start within your own community, workplace, or even your family. Speak out when you witness injustice. Extend support to someone who feels alone. Challenge stereotypes and assumptions that divide people. These small acts, when repeated and multiplied, hold the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. Another crucial step is educating yourself and others. Knowledge is one of the most effective defenses against manipulation and moral decay. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to gain a deeper understanding of how and why people make certain choices. Share this knowledge, not to preach or lecture, but to inspire meaningful discussions that encourage reflection and growth. For instance, have you ever considered how much the stories we engage with influence our thinking? Films, books, and media shape our perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong. By seeking out narratives that challenge your assumptions and broaden your perspective, you cultivate a more nuanced and compassionate view of the world. Now, let's address resilience in the face of pressure. Standing up for what is right often comes with risks, social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal loss. This is why resilience is essential. Resilience does not mean the absence of fear. Rather, it means acting in alignment with your values despite fear. To develop resilience, focus on practices that strengthen your mental and emotional well-being. These may include mindfulness, meditation, journaling, or seeking guidance from mentors and trusted friends. Surround yourself with a community of people who uplift and inspire you. Resilience is not something you cultivate in isolation. It flourishes through connections with others. But what happens when we fail? Because at some point, we will. There will be moments when fear or pressure overwhelms us, leading us to act in ways we later regret. This is where self-forgiveness becomes essential. Self-forgiveness does not mean excusing harmful actions. Rather, it involves acknowledging mistakes, taking responsibility, and committing to doing better. It is about recognizing that failure is an inherent part of the human experience, and that personal growth often emerges from confronting our shortcomings. Take a moment to reflect. Was there a time when you fell short of your own values? How did you respond to that failure? Did you learn from it, or did you allow it to define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is a powerful tool in breaking free from the cycles of harm that the Lucifer effect perpetuates. It enables you to move forward with clarity and purpose, rather than being burdened by guilt or resentment. Finally, let's return to the most profound insight of all, the interconnectedness of humanity. When we come to understand that the boundary between good and evil runs through every human heart, we begin to view both ourselves and others with deeper compassion. This understanding does not justify harmful behavior, but it enables us to engage with the world through empathy and a dedication to healing rather than judgment. Consider the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends waves throughout the world. Will your actions foster division and harm, or will they unite people and inspire hope? Picture a world where each of us takes responsibility for our own decisions, where we resist the forces that dehumanize and divide, and where we work to create environments that cultivate compassion and integrity. This is not an unreachable ideal. It is a reality we can shape, one decision at a time. As we reach the conclusion of this journey, I leave you with one final challenge. Reflect on what you have learned today and ask yourself how you can implement it in your life. How will you recognize and resist the forces that steer you away from your values? How will you contribute to a world where goodness triumphs over darkness? These questions do not have simple answers, but they are worth exploring because, ultimately, the battle between good and evil is not waged on distant battlefields or within abstract theories. It takes place within each of us, every single day. So, the next time you are faced with a moral choice, remember this. You hold the power to choose, the power to resist, and the power to be a force for good in a world that urgently needs it. The question is, will you rise to the challenge? Thank you for listening.